Every time I say we're okay on time, I end up short.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody.
Okay.
There.
Oh.
Which one do you use, Jack?
I'm used to this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, no problem. Yeah, have a seat there.
Oh, you want me to sit there? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Easier to see everybody. All right. Good morning, Shkech for Levi, for leaving us off at the bottom of Yud Zayin and the base. Today's Daf Yud Ches and Yud Tes. So we had a machlokes between Abaye and Rava. Abaye is not as concerned. Says Abaye that normally that we have certain rules, criteria to prevent damage from something which is neighborly, i.e., let's say your neighbor's fence. So you can't do certain things next to the fence, but let's say the fence is not there yet. So can I put the hazard next to the fence that because this hazard is there first, therefore I have every right? Or do we say that, look, a fence could be built there, but now their neighbor can't go ahead and build this fence on his property because you moved this hazard too close to it. So Abaye says there's no fence there, then
you have that in golf. That in golf a lot. Did you notice?
I did never notice. Oh yeah, they do have hazard.
Water.
That is correct.
Call that? The hazard.
That's right. But Abaye says you could be Saimech, you could go ahead and put it there. And Rava says, Ain't a Saimech. Rava says there's no wall there, it doesn't make a difference. The property still has its right. So now we're going to ask several, for the most part, repetitive questions. At least the first four will be repetitive. So let's see. Tashma, come listen, bottom line in Yud Zayin Abayz. Marchikinis agefes v'sa zevel v'sa melach v'sa sid v'sa slime mikaislo shechaver gimel tfachim and some tigadei usad v'sid. So one has to go ahead and distance the leftover olives or manure or salt or lime or stones from the wall of one's friend gimel tfachim or lime it up to the wall to protect it. So Tamadi Kaisa sounds like only over there because there's a wall there, right? You can do to the wall. Mashra, if there is no wall there, then Saimech, then one could go ahead and move it all the way to the property line. So our answer is low. Is we're going to deflect it, and we're going to have this deflection multiple times. Low. No, even if there wasn't a wall, you also wouldn't be put there. So if that's the case, why'd you specifically put it in a scenario where there is a wall there? So to teach you that these things are damaging to a wall. So Toshma similarly, come and listen. Marchikina says, one should go ahead and distance seeds and plows, right? Seeding or plowing or urine or urinating. We'll soon see in the Gemara. What's that scenario from the wall? 3 tvachim. So Tamadi Kaisa. The reason over there is from the wall. Mashman, there's a wall there. Oh, like a Kaisa, but there's no wall there. Then Samach, you can go ahead all the way to the property line. So the Gemara says, low. Even if there's no wall, you can't do it close. So why'd you put it in a scenario where there is a wall? So Kamashman. The mesunsa kosher lekaisa, that's something which is, as Rashi says, davar something which is wet, wetness, moisture. Go ahead and is difficult on the causes damage to the wall. So Toshma, come listen, Veserachaim Gimel Mina Shechav Shein Dalin Mina Arachav. You have to go ahead and distance your millstones. Right? The millstone is larger at the bottom, so which was 3 tefachim, and on top, so therefore because it narrows a little bit on top, which is 4 tefachim, right? Because it's like 1 tefach less close to the side. So you have to go ahead and distance that, right? From the wall. So the reason is because there's a wall there. So some can put all the millstone all the way down. So Gemara says once again, says low. Even if there's no wall, you also can move it closer. What's the chiddush over there? Kamashmalon. The tiraya kosher the kaisa, that the shaking is, the constant banging and smashing using the mill causes damage to the to a wall. So therefore, it teaches you the halachas that how far the distance is. And Tashma. Finally, come and listen. So go ahead and distance the bottom of the oven, which is 3 tvachim from the wall, which is 4 tvachim from the top part. So Tamadi Kaisa, the reason because there's a wall there. Halki Kaisa, something you can put it closer. The Gemara says, "Lo, Kilaka Kaisa nami leisamach. Elamai kamashmalan. How kamashmalan? The havelo kosher Kaisa. That the hevel, the heat, is damaging to the neighbor's wall. Fine." Toshma, come and listen. Lo yiftach adam chanus shel achtaimim v'shel tzvayin tachas eisa shel chavera. A person should not go ahead and these these are, let's say, constantly, let's say, home business. You go ahead and you start selling, I guess, sourdough out of their house, right? As people do, or a person has a little bakery in his house, or he dyes things which have fumes, which have smells, and he shouldn't put it underneath the storehouse, the warehouse of his neighbor's grain. So he has the bottom unit, and upstairs someone has the unit, then he uses it to store grain. Revis Bucker. Also, I guess person raises a certain amount of, let's say, a cattle even in his house. So Tom, the Eitzer, mashma over here is you can't go ahead and do it because underneath the Eitzer of unit 2 north, because you're unit 1 north. Like Eitzer. But if there is no Eitzer, it says of it, you can go ahead and do it. So what do you see over here? You see over here that if the person who's going to be the claimant or the future victim is not, no one's there yet, it's a vacant unit upstairs, I can go ahead and do my bakery or dye shop underneath. It's a kasha and rubber. So the more answers dirashan. Since these things are not in it, we're not talking about putting a millstone in your yard. We're talking about putting a business in your home. And this is your dira. This is how people, they also have income from their dira. This is where they live. So we're not going to go ahead and place the same restrictions on an empty yard as we will on a dira. And therefore, since you're in a dira and the person, the unit upstairs is vacant, even though eventually someone might come and put their ites in there, this, we say you can go ahead, and even Rabba would say you can go ahead and go first. And Diganami, the Daniel Lot says, because if the Revis Bakar was there first, then you can go ahead and leave it. So by the fact that you can go ahead and do it first, mashma, that everybody agrees. So Toshma, come and listen. Lo yita adam ilan similar soda elim kain yirchik b'menu dalar amos. Person should not go ahead and plant a tree close, right, to the field. We don't want the roots getting mixed up. In order, let's say it could be an issue of kilayim elim kain. You distance it dalar amos. V'tani Allah dalar amos shamru kadei avodas haker. So it says over there, in order to go ahead and work the vineyard, in other words, why do you need Dalar Amos around? You need Dalar Amos because you got to go ahead and plow. You don't plow right exactly. You have to go around. You have to have, larger oxen going around. You need Dalar Amos. So Mashma, the only reason we add Dalar Amos is because if you go ahead and plow and you're going to be plowing in your neighbor's yard, therefore distance at Dalar Amos, so you have space there. Oh, lavish. But if it wasn't for the fact that you have to go ahead and plow around there, you would be able to go right next to the boundary. Even though there are roots that will grow down and cause damage. You have some sort of barrier underneath the ground, and therefore the roots are not growing horizontally into the neighbor's yard. And I guess some say take this out, Tashma, some Tashma instead of the Dikanami. And Hayagada bin Zaim, Zessamich together Mikan, Zessamich together Mikan. Let's say you have a case of there's a wall in between. So one is allowed to go ahead and put it up next to his yard, his fence, and the other is allowed to put it up next to his fence. And if that's the case, aim is safe. So in other words, over here, there's you must say over here we're talking about something that's blocking. So and then it says over there that let's say some of the roots are going extended over, right? So then we say in this case that as long as the roots do not come within 3 tefachim of the ground, then those are left. But if it comes within 3 tefachim of the ground, then the neighbor can go ahead and cut those out because that blocks his plowing. And then we're talking about a scenario with a barrier, just in the scenarios with a barrier. So how are they moving over? I thought there was a barrier there. And if there's not, if there's not, in this case, a barrier in this case, and the roots are growing next to his neighbor's yard, then in that case, then you go ahead and you clear out up, from 3 tefachim from the top of the ground, from the topsoil, in order for that your neighbor can go ahead and plow without any difficulty. So Toshma, come and listen. We say you have to go ahead and distance your tree from your neighbor's water pit, 25 amos. Satamadi gabor. The reason because it's a bor, halak a bor, samach. There's no pit there. Then you go ahead and move it all the way over. The one says, look, kilek a bor namile samach. Right? If there's no pit there, also you can't go ahead and put it close. But hakamash one. The ad chafei ava ozli shroshim maski labor. Up until 25 amos, that's how it went. Up to that point, it damages.
The bor is on the borderline there.
So
what's the
right
assumption here?
So
if the bore wasn't there, you wouldn't have to.
Right. So let's say, right. So let's say the bore was 10 amos off.
Yeah.
Right. So then you can go up to 15 amos off. Right.
Not
it exists.
Answer.
No. Right. Not according to the answer. Right. But I'm saying according to half a meters. Now the 25 is over there. So Gemara says even if there's no
it would be
bore,
grandfathered in before.
What was that?
It would be grandfathered in if it was there before the other guy built their pit. Your tree.
Well, right. So in the half a meter, right? In the half a meter, we say that, but we say now in this scenario, we do not say that. We say up until 25 amos.
No matter what.
Right. No. So no. Well, the deflection, right, and not the conclusion. In other words, the half mean is we want to go ahead and say, hey, you can't go ahead and only if there's a pit there. If there's not a pit, you can move it all the way over. So, and therefore you see that not like Rava. So Rava will deflect and say, no, also this case is not there. You always have this is a maximum or minimum even of 25 amos. You can't get close. So it says, and it comes to teach you a separate halacha up to 25 amos. That's how far the root's going to be damaging to his neighbors. So it says, if the tree was first, you cannot go ahead and cut it. The summit understands if you're not allowed to go ahead and put it within 25 amos. So why is there a tree there? How is there a tree there? Right? You're not allowed to do it. Rava, there's a tree there. It must be that you're wrong. It must be a person is allowed to go ahead and put a tree there for us to say that if the tree was there first, you don't have to go ahead and remove it. So our answer is no. Like Rav Papa says later on, we're talking about a case of purchase. In other words, a guy has a big lot and he has an orchard in there. And he has a tree there. And he says, you know what? I don't need all this land. I need some cash. I'm going to go ahead and sell off a parcel. So he sells off a parcel, and that parcel happens to be within 25 amos of his tree. So now the person who bought it says, oh, I'm going to put a pit in, it's 15 amos away. So that's the case. If the tree there was first, therefore, he can't go ahead and since the tree is there first, the tree can stay. So, fine. So Tashma. Around 7 lines from the bottom, so a person has to go ahead and distance, I guess, his soaking pit, which is used, I guess, for flax. He has to go ahead and distance it from his neighbor's vegetables, right? The fumes and all that really damage and affect the taste of the vegetables. That's creation and that's also fetch, right? That's a type of animal feed, also not good for onions. The person has onions next door and he wants to go ahead this fetch, so he's going to cause damage to that. So he has to distance it, and also he has mustard, so he's going to damage to the bees. Why? Because the bees eat the mustard, then they get real hungry, and then they need to eat consume honey, and therefore you're going to consume a lot of honey from the beehives, and therefore it's causing damage to the owner of the beehives. So move your mustard, move your soaking pit, move your vetch. So Tamadika Yarek sounds like the reason is only because those vegetables exist. Halaki Yarek, but there's no vegetables there. So if you go ahead and put it close, Kash and Rava. So your answer is low. Kilakam Yarek Namile. Even if there's no there, you can't go ahead and put it there. But Halkamash one, Dahani Kasha Adadi. We're coming to teach you that these things damage the other things, and therefore that's the Chiddush. One says, Ihachi am a Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. Rabbi Yasi Matir Bechardal. Rav Yasi says, no, when it comes to mustard, the owner of the mustard does not have to move it. Why? Before you say to me, move my mustard from your bees, I'm going to tell you, move your bees from my mustard because it's causing damage to my mustard crop. Right, because they're coming to go ahead and consuming my mustard. So you're damaging to me. In the cases of the vegetables don't cause damage to the veg, and the onions don't cause damage to the vetch, and the onions don't cause damage to the soaking, right? But the mustard and the mustard and the bees go both ways, so therefore they have the same amount of rights. So and if a person cannot go ahead and put them next to each other, how do you have a scenario where they're arguing with one another? Hey, you're putting it too close to mine. It shouldn't even be there in the first place. So Amarav Papa, and this is the original case where Rav Papa says, Amarav Papa, Biloy Keach. We're talking about a case of, once again, a guy had a large property, he had mustard crop there, or he had vetch there, or he had soaking his flax there, and then he sold the parcel immediate next to it, and it was too close within Daladamos, and on that the guy has a complaint.
Not the smartest of guys.
Who, the guy who bought it?
Yeah, no, the guy who did it, because he planted both within his own property. And they.
No, but maybe they
sold off one.
No, but maybe the guy came in afterwards and then decided to build it. He wanted to use it for that reason, right? So Gemara says, but in other words, before that, if you're too close and you come first, right? You have your soaking pit, and then I come in and I want to start planting vegetables, and I can turn to you and say, hey, move your soaking because of my vegetables. So because those are damaging types of things. So Gemara says. So even Keach, my time to Rabbanan. I understand if we're talking about a case of person purchases. So what's the reason according to Rabbanan where the guy can go ahead, the mazik can go ahead and say, you have to go ahead and move it, right? Why should you have to move it? And furthermore, my time to Rabbi Yasi. I feel the Mishnah and even according to Rabbi Yasi, if the guy was there first, I had my mustard there and I bought it afterwards, and now coming and complaints. Why, right? In other words, why would a person be able to go ahead and not say, in addition to my this thing, right? My mustard can stay because I can argue that you're busy damaging it. I can also say my soaking pool can stay and my vetch can stay, right? Well, because so we'll soon see what the discrepancy of is. Amravina. Kasabi Rabbanan alamazik laharchizasm. Right? So now let's start understanding machlokes. Let's say machlokes like this. According to the Rabbanan, they hold it's I'm a damager. In other words, if there's two things, so therefore two things are there, even though that the damager might have been there first, but since my item is damaging, I got to go ahead and move my damaging item. I got to distance it. So okay, if that's the machlokes, so if that's the Rabbanan, the person getting damaged has to go ahead and move it. But that's the case. If you're getting damaged, so then you should move your onion patch. Yeah. That's what it is, and your vegetables, right? Really holds. Everyone holds. The damaging party really has to go ahead and move this. This is what Rabbi Yasi says. Rabbanan. Tina. Okay, I agree with you, Rabbanan, that the person the mazik has to go ahead and pick up his misha. The arka has to go ahead with soaking pit. The arka, because those cases the hani maski hani v'hani lo maski hani, because the damage only goes one way. It only goes from the soaking pit or the vetch the other one way. El chardal v'dvarim, but that what you say that the mustard is damaging to the bees. Tarvayu maski adadi, they both damage one another, and therefore the mazik in this case doesn't necessarily have to do it because they're both. The other guy's also mazik, so therefore he can argue with him in the case of the mustard. And now the Rabbanan say no. The truth is the bees are not damaging to the mustard. They're not damaging to one another. Why? In other words, it turns out it's machlokes and mitzias. It goes both ways. It sounds like if it goes one way, then obviously the mazik has to go ahead and move it. And if it's the other way, so then Rabbi Yossi is saying, if it's theoretically, if it went both ways, then you don't have to go ahead and move it. But according to Rabbanan, it doesn't go both ways. It also only goes one way. Why? Even the seeds, if we're talking about eating the seeds, right? The bees can't, see the mustard seed. They can't see it, the colorblind or whatever it is, and therefore they won't find it. And if it's the leaves, they're going to go ahead and consume. So how that pair, those go back quickly in the mustard, and therefore it does not cause damage to the mustard.
So really, in the case of a lokea, the seller needs to make a stipulation because he could turn into the mazik. He could sell it off and he could turn into the mazik. He needs to make a stipulation at the sale.
Unless it sells as is.
As is, I mean.
No. It is as is, right? But you still have rights to the land, right? The rights to the land, right? As is. But Lamaisa, so I'm not sure actually how it's something. In other words, that a condition, a purchase of property with a condition of usage. You know what I'm saying? It's a funny thing, right?
Selling it and then all this.
Right. So then you got to realize that, right.
Unless it's normally used for a certain purpose.
Right. Then I didn't think it was
That's
going to
what-
be used there, and then all of a sudden the guy puts it there, but Lamaisa, it was too close. The son of Rabbi Yossi Alamazik, what? Rabbi Yossi holds it's on the damager to go ahead and move it. Well, tonight we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Amir, Alpha Pishap or Kodemis Ilan, even though that the pit, which ultimately is the item that gets damaged, was first Ilan Lo Yikots. Right? Because each one is doing on his property and they're allowed to go ahead and do it. So, in other words, you see Rabbi Yossi says, hey, a guy has his own land, and if you don't want your pit damaged, so move your pit away from my property. I can plant a tree in my property. So therefore, you got to go ahead and move it over. So what do you see over there? Rabbi Yossi says, if you don't want your pit damaged, you got to move it over. Move your pit over. Sounds like it's on the nizak to go ahead and move it, right? If you don't want to get damaged, move over. Stop crying to the mazik. Really, he does, and he's saying the back and forth over there was his words to Rabbanan. The Rabbi says, according to me, that the person was getting damaged. You don't want to be damaged, then move your property over, right? Right, and then even in that case, you're soaking in those cases. You don't have to go ahead and move it. If your onions are getting damaged or your vegetables are getting damaged, then move it over. It's on the nizak. But according to you guys, you say no, it's the damager, the guy with the soaking pit and the veg and the mustard. It's okay in the case of the soaking, right? And the veg over there, the honey maski, honey, vahani lamaski, honey. Okay, the damage goes one way. There's only one mask in this case. In the case of chardav, in the case of mustard and bees, tarvayi maski, they each go ahead and damage one another. And the Rabbanan, as we said earlier, they say, no, it doesn't go both ways. No, bees actually do not go ahead and destroy the mustard. So why? If we're talking about consuming the seeds, then lo mishkachasla. We know they won't necessarily find it. Even tarfin, if you're talking about the leaves, then they grow back relatively quickly, and therefore it does not cause damage. Fine. Top of Yud Tes Amud Aleph, which is today's daf. So second line, it says of there you test lo nivrachas hakayfsin. Also, you can't go ahead and actually it's a good thing. I'm gonna put my marker by the Mishnah. We're going to reference them several times. All right. So we say over there, not the all right, this is still part of the first list of items under the water damages was of Lodi Brachas Kaipsin, and not the launderers. They used to have a pit to go ahead and for cleaning the clothes. I won't get into further because the Gemara was Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Rav Hua, Loishana Ela Mina Machmatzin, right? We're only talking about Gimel Tfakim is referring to the soaking. Now, I guess first they used to go ahead and soak it, and afterwards they would go ahead and scrub it. Aval Mina and Nadaim, but the one that you shake it and soak it, more active, more splashing, that is Dalet Amos. So there's two types of launderer's pits. There's one just for soaking, which doesn't really cause splashing, and the other one is for scrubbing. So Tanami is something we learn. The Nivachas of Kaipsin Dalet Amos, right? The Nivachas of the Kaipsin is 4 Amos away from the border. I've on Tanan Gimel Tfakim. I learned Gimel Tfakim in our Mishnah. So Elam Shmami no Rav Nachman says there's two different types. One is only 3 Tfakim. The other one is 4 Amos. Some actually just have a different version of this, but he asks as a kasha. It says Tanan Nivrachas HaKayfsin Gimel Tfakim. It says in our Mishnah, you go ahead and distance the launderer's pit 3 Tfakim from the fence. I've a Tanya about the Bryce says 4 Amos and Rav Nachman, and there says Rav Nachman Rav Hua lo kasha kamina machmitzin kamina dandain. One is just soaking, that's only Gimel Tfakim, and when you're shaking it and scrubbing it, that is Dalet Amos. And Rav Chia Berei Rav Avia Masnila Bahadjar, he says in Beferish Elim Kain Hirchik Misvas Machmatzan Ulekaisa Gimel Tfachim. Right, you can go ahead and put it unless you distance the edge of the soaking pit, not the special one, from the wall. Gimel Tfachim. Fine. Next case, the Sad Basi. Right. So then it says. So our Mishnah says, right, so you have to go ahead and distance. What is the way to prevent damage? Distance. You know what's another way to prevention? There's also, if you line up your neighbor's wall, then you're protecting it. So the question is, the sad besitanan, idilma oisad besitanan. Does it say and? In other words, you got to distance and create and put lime up, or is it you can do one or the other? You can either go ahead and distance and do nothing else, or lime it up and then you can put it closer. So Gemara says, "Shita desad besitanan." Besad. You got to do both. Why? If you think it's you can do one or the other, same case in the Ravina of Lisniu, right? If that's the case, go ahead and listen together. Because if you look at the Mishnah, it lists several categories. It says lo yachbar adam bor v'samach lebar shel chaver v'leisiach v'leimora v'leibam samayim v'leinivrachas kayfsim elim ken yichli mikvaisol chaverosh v'leishim tfachim v'sad v'si. And then it says, "Machikin as a geves, please. All right, as a geves, as a zeva, as a melech, as a siv, as a slime, because you're chaver v'leishim tfachim v'sad v'si." And then it says another one. So why are there two different phrases with the same distance, right? Same distance, right? Gimel tfachim and or right lime it. So if it's the same halacha, just as instead of going 4 and 5, just do 9 and then one long list. It must be that the first one is both and the second one is or. So Gemara says, no, maybe that's not the case. The dum mishum dloi dami hayas equal hayas zeka. Maybe there's just teaches that there are two types of hazekas. Reish hazeka the masuna. And say hazeka the hevel. One is the damage of moisture. And the other one is the damages of hevel, of heat. So Tashma, come listen. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Selo hababi adayim. Selo hababi adayim. Zechayfer bara mikan. Zechayfer bara mikan. So you have a case of a person that he's able to go ahead and basically it's very loose soil and he's able to go ahead and dig with his hands. So each one can go ahead and dig, and he has to distance gimel tfachim and lime it up. And this one is different. So it sounds like only over case tama de babedayim. Sounds like only because it's loose. Halo babedayim. Low, then you wouldn't have to do both. So you see, it's not both. It's only both in the case of loose. The Gemara says, "Lo, who didn't have forgot the babedayim? If it's not loose, nami." So if that's the case, sabasid, nami sabasid. If it's not loose babedayim, you have to do both. And nevertheless, we need a case over here. To teach us a special case when there's loose, right? Loose soil, right? Maybe you need more distance, not just gimel tefachim, it's loose. Maybe you got to be daled almonds or something. Kamash malon, that is sufficient. Yeah. Fine. Next case. So then he says, so you got to go ahead and distance these items that are listed in the Mishnah, basically from the heat, the manure, and the salt and those things. When stored together, they create heat, which is damaging to the wall. So Tan Hasam we learn over there in Masechah Shabbos. It says, can one go ahead and insulate? Excuse me, one cannot go ahead and be insulate. Right, and then it's goes in colder, right? Goes in sand. Same list. Our Mishnah had those same items, and instead of sand, he had saline, rocks, right? Flintstones, or a type of a limestone, or something type of rocks. And over there, it mentions sand, right? So so whether those are wet or dry. So why over here do we write rocks and over there the sand? And over there the doesn't say rocks. Because over there it didn't say stones, because it's not the nature of people to go ahead and use stones, right? To go ahead and heat up. Perhaps they're damaging. Some or it doesn't work. Let's see. Some of the abide. What a person who argument. A person who uses wool strips normally, or argamon, whatever the dyed wool, whatever the purple, the dyed wool, right? I know my sister-in-law's license plate, argamon, right? So anyway, so that's not a normal way to go ahead and insulate. In the Tanya, we learned about it. Right? Right? You can go ahead and use those items and the wool over there and stuff that are combed out, and you can't move them. So wait, So if you're saying the stones are not listed there because that's not the normal way of insulating, well, it's not the normal way of insulating the argamon and these wool strips, and nevertheless, the Mishnah is teaching about it. So let the Bryce is teaching us. So let the Mishnah teach about it. No, yogi the law of Reyo. In other words, we only list some, and that teaches the rule, and then that will include others. So Tanahacha Salai. So therefore, right over here, stones, and also sand would apply to our case. Putting it close to the neighbor's fence. And over there, when it meant sand, it also meant to include stones. So Amalei Rav says, Rav, Yagi the law of Reyo. I understand if that you learn one case and his friends will teach about it. Okay, so have all the list in one, and have in the second one just list one. So instead of going 4 and 4, just list 9 and 1, right? Or list them all, or instead of or not even 9, it's 6, right? 6 and 1, right? Coming up, idach. They can learn one from the other. So over there, the reason why he doesn't say Salayim is Mishun the Mishtachi Leila Kadera. Right? It can cause damage to the pot. People, the Dafka don't use stones because it can be damaging. And Hachai the time to Lake Tani Chol. And the reason over here why you don't say sand is Mishun the Machmimi Karer. That things that are warm, it insulates it to keep warm, and things that are cold, it keeps cold. So sand isn't always something that causes heat to the fence. So therefore, only if something is hot does sand work. But sand doesn't create heat. If something is cold, it will just insulate the coldness. And if something is hot, it will insulate the heat. So therefore, the sand really does not have the effect of creating heat on the neighbor's wall. And therefore, but Dafka was not going ahead and listed there. But Tanya Vaishya sand. So Halasam Masuna. Over there, we're talking about wet sand, right? So wet sand is an issue of moisture. So Tadida Nami listening. If that's the case, so why don't we say wet sand in our Mishnah? Velukbe Mosnisin. So it says Hatanale Amas Hamayim. Right? So no, because we have a case of Amasamai, we're talking about a case of channels of water. So Atu Milo Ktani Amasamai Ktani Nivrachas Akaifsin. But it doesn't list other multiple water damages, such as the launderer's pit, right, that used to soak clothes, and the channel of water. So he wants to say, if it was the channel of water, because that's more what's a kavua. But if they had the launderer's pit, it's only temporary. Maybe I'd say no. If and if we just had that case, mishum to cover kind of low. But over there, that was only a launderer's pit, because over there, that is that is not on its own, right? He has to go ahead and put water into it. But amasamayim. Maybe the channel, I would say no, since it's like self-sufficient, it's on its own. Kamash Malon, or therefore it's speaking, you have to list both cases. And then we say Marchikas 4 lines in the bottom, Marchikas Zraimas and Machrisha, go ahead and move the seeds and the plows. Zrai, I understand what's the reason why you can't go ahead and plant seeds next to the neighbor. So typically Machrisha. The whole reason why normally we say at the distance Dalad Amos by planting is because you have to go ahead and plow, but you just said plowing. So why is planting different than plowing? It's really the same thing. So our answer is Mishum. So he says, we were talking about a case of where you're, planting with your hands. So Machrisha, so the whole reason of plowing, right, is because of the planting. So just so you can't plow the plants. So that says we're talking about plowing for trees. Maya. Maybe we'll say it's because of these cases, because you have to go ahead and water it, and I have to go ahead and water it. Then I'm causing damage to my neighbor's wall by the moisture damage. So our answer is no. We're talking about a case in there. We're talking about a case over there when the land is watered by Hashem, and therefore the land is watered by Hashem. It's a special bracha by Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, he's not planning to go ahead and whenever rain is watering there, comes from Hashem, and not comes to him irrigating it. So Lamemra, Dizrayim, are you going to say that Dizrayim is something? Kamashtarshi, right? They only grow, they grow sideways, right? But now we learn in the Mishnah, Hamavrich Esagefim Ba'aretz. One goes ahead and he bends down like a vine into the ground. So it starts to grow up, and then the vines grow long. So I have an idea. I'm going to dig it down into the ground and let it come out in the ground and further up, right? So those of you who have art scrolls, a little picture over there, cute little picture. As basically that one more division. So America's a Gavin Ba'aretz. One goes as the emain al gaba al farsh tvachim lo yavi zerla. If there's not on top of it 3 tvachim to the topsoil, then you can't go ahead and plant on top of it. The Tanya law of Azorias it's something but you can go ahead and plant on the sides. So understand, we had earlier that the seeds, right, that grow out because we were afraid about causing damage, right, more than gimel tefachim. And over here, we seem to say that as long as it's not, nothing underneath, right, then you can't do it for underneath it, but you can do it next to it, so it doesn't go on the side. So Amarav Chaga v'Shem Rabbi Yosi mipnei shemachtilas hakarka u'malin afar tichuach. Because over there, that the roots will go ahead and break up the soil and become soft, and therefore the place. So even though that they don't necessarily grow sideways, but nevertheless the plants, the zra'im growing will loosen the ground, and therefore they loosen the ground. Therefore, it will cause damage to the wall. Fine, 2 dots. So then we say. That's meraglaim and a kaisa gimel. It's also to urinate right within 3 tvachim of the neighbor's wall. So I'm Rabbi Rachana muter liadon hashtimayim b'tzad kaisa shel chaver. Person is allowed to go ahead and urinate on a neighbor's wall. See, the pasuk says v'kireisi la'achav mashtin bekir the otzer v'azav b'Yisrael. So it says there when describing who's going to go ahead and be cut off. That's right. Referring to Achav. And one of the cases, one of the way to describe people are those who mashtin bekir, those who urinate in the wall. Referring to man. So it's referring to man as this is what people do. So it says it seems to be one would halachically be allowed. If we're described as, or man is described as a urinator on a wall, so therefore you can assume that urinating on a wall should be mutter. So when it says no, Hasan b'Shefin over there, our Mishnah is talking about is referring to a case of where you so yes, you are allowed to go ahead and right because our Mishnah says Tanan. Mishnah says that's very glad in a place so you can't go ahead and you can't do it on the wall. So what is it? How can you say it's mutter? Mishnah says it's also. So when it says Hasan b'Shefin, our Mishnah doesn't mean. That means you have an outhouse or whatever it is, and then you take it to pour it out. You can't go ahead and pour out your bucket of urine on the neighbor's wall. You could that you have to. This is gimel tefachim. You're going to
can't be on the wall. Doesn't mean you should.
You should. Right? Okay, come on. Right.
They didn't have cameras back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may.
Yeah. All right. So skip the parentheses. Right. We'll take that out there. We'll take what Masos Shas gives us. All right. So Toshma, come listen. So we have another Bryce that says a person should got to go ahead and urinate on his friend's wall. Right. But only if he does himself gimel tefachim. But we're only talking about a wall made of bricks. That's more damaging about b'kaisel on him. In order, you get closer as long as you don't damage it. The comma, and how much is that? That is a tefach. That is a tefach. It's shel tsuma. In a case where the ground is rocky, mutter. That is mutter. So in other words, normally you can only go ahead and not do it right at the wall because it causes damage to the ground under the wall. Right. In the case of the brick, there's mortar over there, and therefore the merry-go-round will be. But with the cases of the rocks. There is no mortar in the wall, and therefore that would be okay. But over here, cause damage to the ground. So we see, but if the ground is also rocky, then it's mussar to yufta, to Rabbi Rachana to yufta. This would be a kasha on Rabbi Rachana, who says that it's mutter to go on the wall. So this is Rabbi Rachana Kra Kamar. He brought a pasuk. The pasuk seemed to say, referring to man as wall urinators, right? So Hasam Haki Kamar means to say afilu mida darkel lishni bekir. Right, even something that normally goes to the bathroom on a wall will not survive. That's what the pasuk meant. My niu kalba, that is referring to a dog. It wasn't referring to man. Rather, it's referring to dog. Dog was the wall urinators, not man, and therefore, the Rabbi Bar Chana has no proof. Fine. Amar Rav Tuvi Bar Kisna Amar Shmuel. So now we're How do we get on this topic? Let me think. Let's see. All right. Rocky. I forgot where this is going, but let's see. So now, normally a person has tuma in one room. The ohel collects all the tuma. If there is a wall in between, so the wall and the mace is in one room, and there's people in the other room or food, whatever it is, that remains tar because there's a wall. But let's say there's a wall with an open space with a window. So now, if the window is a certain size, right, which I believe is it. Let me just see. Because of A, I know. Tefach by tefach. Right, so it has to be a tefach. If there is an airspace of tefach by tefach, small, right? So then the tuma goes in between the two. So he says, so Rakik ain't a my bechon. So let's say you have a wafer. So now let's say it's exactly a 4x4 space, or whatever. 4x4 is like, I meant 4 inches, which is tefach. A tefach space. But let's say you have a tefach space. Then, and you have a one wafer. So it's tefach by tefach minus a wafer, which is obviously not a tefach by tefach because some of it is blocked up. So if that wasn't considered a wafer, let's say that was built in, right? That wafer was attached. So therefore the space wouldn't be big enough. So does the wafer minimize the airspace to say that the tuma does not travel from one to the other? That's going to be the question here. So I guess we're talking about walls here. So he says, so Rocky came to my becholon. So my area Rocky. I understand why you say Rocky. Afilu. So is even a case of avanami. Even if it's let's say something which is a thick piece of cake. Why just a wafer? So loy boy come on. Loy boy ava came to see leila alavatale. Not a case of a cake. If a person sees it, right? He won't take it away. In other words, because of big piece of cake, ishma cake, certainly a person is going to go ahead and take the nice big piece of wedding cake, the mice. But over here, the wafers are sitting there. Since it's sitting over there, maybe a person won't touch it. If a person won't touch it, it's going to stay there for a long time. But maybe if it stays there for a long time, maybe it should be an effective way to be memayet, right? And he's not going to go ahead and eat it and leave it there. So kamash blah, then not. So what do you see over here? You see the whole svara is if this item is something that a person is going to go ahead and take and remove once he notices it there, so then it doesn't block the space. If it's something that he's going to go ahead and leave it there, right, it will remain there more like permanent, so then it perhaps could be might. Wait, well, if this is edible, this is makabel tuma. So something is makabel tuma cannot be a blocker for tuma to pass through. It shouldn't qualify in the first place. So even if it's permanently there, if it's something which is makabel tuma, can't go ahead and block it. So our answer is shanilas meiperos. That normally food is susceptible when it has one of these 7 liquids. So one of those liquids is not fruit juice. So therefore, fruit juice does not make something susceptible to tuma, right? And therefore, since this is not susceptible to tuma, therefore it could potentially work as a tuma blocker, as we'll call it. So meisave esukasha. So kupa malaya teven v'chavis malaya grogras. So let's say you have a box that was full of straw, or a barrel that was full of dried figs, and it was sitting there, and it's lying in this window to go ahead and block. So we say, if by removing the box wasn't there, and the contents of the box were still there, right? Then we'll say those contents are blocking. You can go ahead and take the box with the contents are blocking. But if not, then it's not a chatzitza. So Gemara says, wait, how can you say that? But I understand. So even if the tevin is left there on its own, and in theory it would stay there by its own and no block, and therefore you can say it's tevin. But tevin, you see the tevin, I'm going to go ahead and use the tevin. Just in the case of the nice piece of birthday cake, I can go ahead and take it down. The straw, oh, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and feed my animals. But tevin chazabam. So Gemara says, but sorry, we're talking about it was already bad, already rotted, and it's no good. Okay, I have a good use for straw. Good use for straw is using it for brick, right? The storms there. So okay, you can still go ahead and use it for fuel. So Masuna, we're talking about, it's wet. It's wet. It's not going to go ahead and catch fire easy. Chazal has a gadol, right? It's good for a big bonfire. Anything, even wet straw will burn in that. So when it says has a gadol, so has a gadol, a large bonfire is not common to a person to go ahead and use. Cooking fires are common, but not large fires. Maybe once a year, lag ba'omer. So grugras, what are the dried figs? Ha chazilei. So he can go ahead and take us. I'm a shmuel, shobet the reefer. We're talking about a case of where they became moldy and wormy, and therefore a person will not go ahead and take these dry figs. He also explained in this case, talking about where they became wormy. So the says, "Hi, chavis hechi damya." I understand. What is this case of the barrel? Eat the pumalabar. If we're talking about where it faces away, so now a barrel has one opening. So if it faces away, the other way. Right, so top of the page, he gufa tifas, right? So the barrel itself, why are you saying, oh, if the barrel wasn't there, right? But the barrel is there, and the barrel is facing outside, it should work. It's not makabel tuma, even though it's a kli, but it's the back of this kli cheres, and therefore it should not go ahead and block hiyuvadichas, right? The kli cheres enamatami megabo. It does not become tummy from the side or the bottom, and therefore the side of the bottom is the one blocking, and not the open space. So therefore, it's not a kabel tumah. Should go ahead and block. So Gemara says, "Ella the pumaluknava." It must be that it was facing inside. It's facing inside. This becomes tummy. So this can't be the blocker. Then we see maybe in theory the straw can be a blocker on its own. Or yes, it is facing outside. We're talking about something which is metal. Something which is metal is makabel tuma even from the sides or from the bottom, and therefore, since that's tuma, it can't be used as a chatzitza. All right, we'll stop here. Shkayach, everybody. We will pick up.